customer experience on the foundation of technology.
Try to say that 3 times fast.
Yeah, exactly. That was a mouthful, right? Like I said, welcome. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to attend. My name's Lawson Owen with Proactive Dealer Solutions. I'm one of the managing partners with Proactive. Myself and 3 others will be helping to orchestrate today's meeting and just to go through real quickly and introduce them. To my left is Matt Lowry. Matt is with Proactive Dealer Solutions. He is our Director of Training. Also with us today, and we're excited to have them, is going to be Miss Danielle Mills, who is the Senior Regional Manager with Prodigy. So we've got Miss Danielle with us, and then we've got Trung Nguyen, who is the Strategic Accounts Director with Prodigy. So we'd like to welcome them as well. So between the 4 of us, we're hopefully going to make this a very action-packed, information-filled hour. And again, we appreciate you taking time to be with us. So just real quickly, we'll go through who we are here at Proactive Dealer Solutions. We've been out there in the marketplace for a long time, the better part of actually over 20 years. Yep. We specialize in the setup and the implementation of business development centers, as whether it be for sales or for service. But at our core, what we are is process management and lead management consultants, consulting company. And we really focus on 4 primary areas when we work with a partner, a dealer partner of ours. First thing is going to be the culture. Let's build a culture of increased lead awareness, improved lead management, whether it be with digital retail or what we refer to as modern retail, or with some of the traditional models. But let's build the right culture. And that's going to be important, certainly as we move into more of this modern retail environment, understanding where the consumer is at, understanding the expectations of today's consumer, but also understanding the technology that we have in place, and then how to leverage that technology, not only to the benefit of the consumer, but more importantly, benefit to the dealer, so we can maximize every opportunity that we have. And we do that by aligning processes and goals and objectives, right? So the first thing we have to do is understand who we are and what's our target objective, and then build processes around those. And so we'll help them clarify, our dealer partners clarify the target, clarify the goals and the objectives that are in alignment with who they are and where they are in this modern retail process that they're trying to implement. The third thing we do is we help them find the right people, right? Obviously, the market is changing. A lot of dealers and a lot of organizations have had a reduction in staff. Yep. So we help them find the right people who have the right mindset and the right internal drive to really move and motivate today's consumers. And then our goal and objective is to drive that not only customer experience, but that employee experience, right? So when we have happy employees, we're going to have happy customers. At the end of the day, modern retail is all about enhancing or elevating that customer experience.
Right. And then what do we need to do to develop those employees and get them to actually execute on those processes and that culture that we set up?
And that's why training is so important. One of the biggest challenges with training organizations is taking that training. All training is theory, right? The what to say, how to say it, why you say it, what's the process, how do you implement it, how do you execute? And that's really what we focus diligently on, is taking that theory to practical application. And it's no different with technology. That technology has some basic fundamental functionality, right? Which is going to help streamline an organization, make them become more efficient. But if we don't understand how to implement and execute on that technology every single day, we won't get the right benefits, the growth, but also more importantly, the dealer won't get the right return on investment.
Right. And so that's what's great about this webinar that we're doing today, the training we're doing today, is that we have Prodigy with us to represent that technology side and give us, what are they seeing out in that marketplace. So with that said, let's kick it over to Trung so he can tell you a little bit about Prodigy and what is it that they're bringing to their dealers.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Matthew. Appreciate that. So yeah, really Prodigy is an end-to-end digital retailing platform, right? As you can see, Proactive Solution really focuses on the process, and they're one of our process partners. So when you talk about technology, you can't just expect to slap a button on your website and expect to sell a bunch of cars from it, right? The button is really only as powerful as the process behind it. So here at Prodigy, really the end-to-end digital retailing platform allows consumers to really start beginning their deal completely online. And we want to allow the customers to shop in the way that they want to shop. So if they want to do as much as possible online, we're going to allow them to do that through our technology. Or if they want to do as little as possible, that's okay too. Eventually, when these customers make their way into the actual dealership itself, which what we're seeing in the data is that customers still want to show up to your showroom floor. They still want to come into your dealership. As long as you're building that rapport with them and you're giving them that consistent and guided process, we want to make sure that we also have a platform at the other end to help support those customers as well. So we work with some of the largest OEMs and dealer groups around the nation on optimizing their digital retailing strategy. And, super excited to be here along with my colleague, Danielle. Danielle, you want to say hello?
Hey guys, really excited to be here. This is a jam-packed session, so we have a lot coming for you, so stay tuned. It's about to get real good.
Awesome. I'll go ahead and kick that back to you, Matt.
Yep, absolutely. So what we're going to be talking about through this is how do we marry that technology up with what at our core we do.
Right. And at the end of the day, and I think that, Trun said it pretty well. I hadn't heard it put that way. The button is only as powerful as the process that supports it. And I think that that's a great key takeaway early on in this session. But when we partner with an organization, we really look at basic fundamental things aside from the technology. The first is going to be the structure. Do we have the proper structure in place? And by that, I mean, do we have the proper lead management team in place? And there's no right or there's no wrong. There's just that which works. But we work to ensure that the dealer has the right structure. And then we move into the process, right? So the structure is also about accountability. And accountability is really what leads to the process. The process will identify the things that are important, those KPIs that are going to be necessary for us to effectively determine, are we processing the consumers in the most effective and streamlined way? And that's really what we want to do. We want to meet the customer where they are in their shopping journey. To Trung's point, if they want to do more online, then we want to do more online. If they'd rather visit the dealership, then we want to encourage them to visit the store. The reality is, and we've all seen this certainly over the past 90 to 120 days, the consumer is more comfortable doing more of the road to the sale, if you will, online. And we actually want to encourage them to do that, right? So we want to meet them where they are in their shopping journey and then move them to the next step online. What we want to do is to move them lower in that sales funnel. So when they do visit the dealership, they've already selected a vehicle. They've already had a soft pull on their credit. They already know what the financing looks like or a lease or a buy comparison, so that they're further down that sales funnel, which makes the job of a salesperson or a sales manager that much easier. Go ahead.
And a big part of that too is, are we picking them back up in the showroom where they left off?
Right. Yeah. So what we need to have, and this is where a lot of stores have a problem. It's that continuity of messaging, right? So as I'm online at your website, there's a brand promise that the dealer puts out there, right? That moves or motivates the consumer to engage. And let's just say that I'm on your website. There's a brand promise, and going through that process online, I'm motivated to call the dealership. There has to be a continuance of that brand promise, right? A continuity of messaging from your website to that phone up, which then has to continue onto the sales floor, right? And so when we have that consistency in communication, that consistency or continuity of messaging, it creates a level of comfort, right, for the consumer, because they like things that are predictable. They like consistency because that's what they're looking for, as opposed to fractured messaging. And that's why the people process is going to be so important as well. Our people have to understand, where is today's consumer? What are the expectations of today's consumers? What is the information that they're expecting almost in a split second? We have to be prepared to meet them where they are, meet or exceed their expectations by giving them what they're looking for, right? And then it comes down to the technology. And Prodigy is an amazing tool, but a lot of stores are still struggling with it because they're trying to take this amazing technology, right, and just implement it into more of a traditional model. And that fractured approach is causing some inconsistency in not only utilization of the product, but inconsistency with the customer and the customer experience. And so today is about, how do we get everybody on the same page? How do we understand the power within the technology that we have? And how do we put that square peg into a square hole as it relates to the dealer environment, so that, again, we can expedite the customer experience, right? Condense time, make it easier for them to get information, make it easier for them to make a buying decision about our products and services, and then motivate them to go further down the sales funnel and then ultimately visit the dealership.
Right. And so we definitely see those problems when we're going into stores and we're trying to help them implement a modern retailing or digital retailing solution. Trung, Can you tell us a little bit when you're going in and you're setting up stores and they're engaging with your tool for the first time, what are some of the issues that you're seeing when you're going in there as far as getting the people, the process, and the structure together?
Yeah, I think, early on when we were implementing our tool, this was new to all of us, right? Digital retailing was a new thing in the market. And I think a lot of providers rush towards an implementation. So if you're currently utilizing a digital retailing tool today and you've implemented one and you're not seeing or yielding the results from it, I would advise you to audit your process, right? We actually go in, and before we actually launch and install somebody, we actually help the dealerships audit their internal processes, right? Do you have a dedicated internal champion that's really going to champion the product all the way from the structure, the process, and the buy-in from the people as well? So those are the things that we really look at when we're looking at partners, is ensuring that they have that foundation in place to ensure that the technology is going to work, right? Because technology is technology. We can easily go in and implement it and install it on your website and provide you the tools and the solutions to use. But if you don't have those right pieces in place, you're not going to be, you're not going to see all the success from it, right? So I would say some of those are some common mistakes that we see from dealers, and the feedback that we get from is, we're not seeing the results from digital retailing. And is it the technology? Is it the process? So I would say if you have a combined approach with kind of what Matt and Lawson's talking about here, where you're really thinking about all four of those pillars, you're definitely going to be able to see those results that you're looking for.
Yeah, that's a great point, Trung. And just as a point of comparison, think about CRM and CRM technology and how long CRMs have been out there in the marketplace, and how many dealers have a difficult time actually leveraging the functionality within a CRM, right? I would argue that the vast majority of dealers utilize somewhere between 15 to 20% of the capacity or functionality of a CRM. And a lot of that stems from lack of process or lack of process implementation and execution. So we've seen a continuance of that, if you will, as it relates to some of these digital retail platforms. It's not the technology, right? And you can pick the one that's right for your organization, right? Again, Prodigy is an amazing tool. But if it's not going to be supported with the right fundamental processes that are implemented and executed upon consistently, meaning every time, every opportunity, then you're not going to create the customer experience that you were hoping for. You're not going to create or drive more opportunities into your sales funnel. You're not going to create and drive more traffic to your showroom floor. And then ultimately, you're not going to sell, right, more vehicles. And that's the whole point of the exercise. If you think about it, if we make it easier for customers to get information, if we answer all their questions in the comfort of their home or wherever they're doing their research, right, and we create an elevated customer experience as a point of comparison to the dealership down the road, they're just going to naturally gravitate to your environment because it's been a more enjoyable experience. And if you think about it, people will pay for convenience. They'll pay more money for convenience. And we're already starting to see that with a lot of our partners who have picked the DR platform. They're creating more traffic. They're having more relevant and pertinent conversations, right, that the customers find to be of value to them, and they're going further down the sales funnel. And then when they show up, they're closing that traffic at 60 to 70% ratio as opposed to a 25 or 30% ratio.
And how awesome was that?
Which might have been more of the traditional closing ratio from floor traffic. So we're creating a better informed, better prepared, lower funnel sales opportunity just by implementing and executing some processes that'll help you leverage the technology.
Absolutely. And so our agenda during the next 45 minutes or so, with some of the things that we're going to be talking about, is how do we identify those gaps, those fail points? What are those common challenges that we're seeing out there? Then how do we optimize that customer experience, empower your people through technology? We're going to talk about some of the antiquated KPIs that are out there. What have we been talking about for decades, and how does that change what we should be looking at right now? We're going to talk about how do we shape our culture to support the new ways of working? How do we get everyone in the dealership on board with this? A lot of times what we see is it starts at the top, the dealer's on board with this, but not necessarily your sales manager, your salespeople, the ones that are actually out there doing it. And then we're going to talk about how do we humanize that technology through better engagement. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to have conversational commerce, exactly what you just talked about, having more relevant conversations.
Great phrase, yeah.
Right. And then we'll wrap up and do a Q&A. If you have any questions, this is a meeting for you guys. We want you to participate. We have the little chat thing there, a little QA button there. If you have any questions, challenge us, engage with us, throw out what you're seeing in your store, and we'll be more than happy to get it on here and talk about it while we go through this.
Yeah, just real quickly before we move on to the next slide, which is goals. Just real quickly, I want to touch on KPIs. KPIs obviously means key performance indicators, right? They're the performance metrics behind a process. For me, it goes a little bit deeper than that, right? They say that the quality of management's the quality of the questions that we ask. And that's why KPIs are so important to me, because each dealership, each management team is going to have a different focus, a different goal, a different objective. But that focus, goal, or objective has got to be supported by KPIs. So as we go through and we start to clarify what some of these KPIs are, it'll bring focus to areas of opportunity within your sales process. It'll give you awareness as to how well you're performing, and that'll lead to questions, right? So the first stage of management is always awareness. The second stage of management is action. What's my action plan? Now that I'm aware, now that I know what my KPIs are, what am I going to do to improve that outcome? And then the third stage of management is review. And then it's really wash, rinse, repeat. It goes from awareness to an action plan to review those actions. Are they producing the results that we want? And that's why KPIs are going to be so critical, so important. And I encourage you to take a lot of notes, but also, to Matt's point, ask us some questions, right? Challenge us, make us sell you, if you will, on why you should have a shift in thought, right? A paradigm shift, how you should look at your digital retail, your modern retail environment and processes a little bit different. Hopefully that's what we're going to be able to do, or encourage you to do after this session.
Because we actually did that. I mean,
100%.
It was completely against this when we started this a couple of years ago. And we had to sit down and we had conversation after conversation. And it was a back and forth. It wasn't just a magical aha moment. It was a lot of going back and forth saying, are we going to really throw out and stop doing what we've been doing for 20, really the industry's been doing for forever?
Sure.
And really embrace this. But what I will tell you now is, through those questions and challenging it, if I was to go back in the dealership world, there's no way this isn't what I would be doing. This is exactly what
we have a partner, and in less than 5 months have sold an additional upwards of 135 to 155 additional vehicles by fully adopting and implementing and executing on a digital retail model, a modern retail model. They have less traffic visiting the dealership, but their closing ratio has almost doubled. And that's really the whole point of the exercise. So for years, to Matt's point, we were known as the get them in guys. Just get them in, get them in, get them in. If I give more traffic to the showroom or to the service drive, if I allow salespeople and managers to get in front of more people, we'll ultimately sell more vehicles. Our efficiencies didn't really improve, but we just had more at-bats, if you will. Now we're focused on, again, how do I streamline the process, not only for the consumer, but for the dealership, right? How do I meet the consumer where they are? How do I have more relevant and pertinent conversations that are more meaningful to the consumer, that is going to move or motivate them to go further down the sales funnel and then want to visit the dealership? So not only have we seen a significant increase in closing ratios from floor traffic, our show ratios are through the roof. You know, ever since Henry Ford, we've been saying half your appointment show, half buy a car, right? And if you could get to that point, you know, you were pretty happy with yourself. Now we see 75, 80, 85% of appointments showing up because they're so low in the funnel. The only thing left is touch it, feel it, smell it, drive it sign, right? That's it. They want to actually validate that the vehicle's there. They can touch it, they can feel it, they drive it, and then they're going to want to wrap the deal up. So again, the whole idea of a modern retail environment and leveraging Prodigy, right, and those other types of digital retail tools is, how do we leverage the opportunity to maximize it for both the dealership, but ultimately the consumer as well?
Absolutely. So as we get started, yes, a couple of people have already chimed in asking if we're going to send this information out afterwards. Yes, absolutely. We'll get it to you guys. So if you miss anything or we get too boring and you fall asleep halfway through it, you'll be able to.
I might fall asleep. So we'll see how that goes.
Right. So we're going to start out with our first poll, our first question that we're going to ask you guys to kind of give us some direction on. And so what our question is what are your goals for digital retailing? How do you want to use the tool? How do you see it happening? So it's going to pop up on your screen in just a second.
In just a
There
second.
we go. Just a second. No pressure there, Jason, at all. So it should have just popped up on your screen. Take a look at that. We're going to give it about 60 seconds so everyone can reply to it. And just tell us, what is your goal for digital retailing? How do you see this? Is it about better lead engagement? Is it more quality leads? just lead generation. We just want more leads, better overall customer experience, streamline more efficient processes, or speed up the buying cycle to close deals faster. And you can select more than one. And as you guys are going through there, I see some of your questions that are coming in here. And yes, we'll get to those as we go through this.
You want to do that after the goals?
What's that?
You want to do the questions after the goals?
Yep, yep.
Okay, cool. Questions are the best part of this whole thing, guys.
Yes.
We strongly encourage you to ask your questions. I'm sure you can appreciate that in 60 minutes, it might be tough to cover all the questions, but what we supply you after the fact is like a FAQ. So all the questions that have been asked or posed to us, we're going to go through and answer them, and then we're going to supply those to you as well, because we want to make sure that everyone gets from this that which they hope to. Right?
And I love so Megan, you're like the teacher's pet. She said, I wanted to select all of them, but I stuck to 3, but I'd like to do all of, you know what? Good answer there. All right, why don't you go ahead and show us the results there, Jason? What did we get out of this? So we can see, we got actually a pretty mixed bag here.
Where's that come up?
Process wins.
Yes. Yeah, you're not looking. So you're blind to it. Don't worry about it. So streamline, more efficient process just edged it out at 54%. So most people were wanting process, followed by lead engagement and a better overall customer experience, both tied for second.
What's the percentage?
51%. 46% said more quality leads. 34% said speed up the buying cycle, and 23% said lead generation. So I'm liking those numbers. Danielle, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing here with these numbers and what our audience is seeing compared to what you guys were seeing out there?
Yeah, so I'm really liking these responses from the audience because they're very like broad and diverse. Because a lot of times what we see is a lot of people want lead generation, and that is not the ultimate goal when it comes to selecting a digital retailing solution. It's really for a lot of the other reasons. So I'm really glad that a lot of the listeners on here are picking things like better lead engagement and also better overall customer experience. So by doing that, that is going to get you the result that you want. So I'm actually really happy with these poll results here.
Yeah, that's great. You know, it's funny. 54% said they want to see an enhancement or improvement in process or process execution. I think that's the biggest challenge that we have in retail today. And what I would encourage you to do, right, and write this down for me, right? Ask yourself, ask your management team, do you have a process in place or do you have recommended behavior? Okay, do you have a process or do you have recommended behavior? A process means that every employee follows it every single time. If you've got 10 salespeople and 4 managers and the 10 salespeople are doing it different, right? So 10 different ways. Your 4 managers approach it differently. They ask different questions. They have a different level of leniency, right? It's okay not to follow the process. It's okay not to adhere to the strategy or the game plan. If that's the environment, you're going to have a mixed bag of results. And fundamentally, from a management perspective, you know, a process makes the environment controllable and predictable. Write that down for me. Process makes the environment controllable and predictable. So if you've got 10 people doing it 10 different ways, right, things are no longer controllable and predictable, right? We don't know what the outcome is going to be. And the whole idea of this process is, right, this road to the sale, it helps us understand where the consumer's at and where we have to be at to move them to the next step. So a process is going to be critical. And again, I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we see out there in the marketplace. And 23% for lead gen. I'm so glad that that's not a big number. And I think we've been working diligently to get people to understand these platforms are not lead gen. It's enhanced lead management. It's an engagement tool. Was that Tron?
Yeah.
That jumped in?
Yeah, you know, Lawson, you bring up a good point there in terms of just like being able to create that consistent process all around. And you know, sometimes the managers, they don't have the right tools or the right type of technology for them to be able to manage that, right? So one of the things that Prodigy and just technology in general can really help with is really being able to have tracking and reporting and accountability, right? So it's like, how do we know when there's a lapse in the process that's been put into place? How do we know when a sales associate is deferring and not following the process that's put into place? by the management team that knows that this process is scalable and it's something that works every single time. So being able to have tools that will show you as a management team when these salespeople or these customers are falling out from the process, being able to have the reporting and really going back to the KPIs that you had mentioned, Lawson, is, what are the things that we want to track here, right? Is it like the percentage of people that's adopting and utilizing and staying true to the process on every single cell? And when you create that guided and consistent process, only then you'll be able to really scale it, right? And multiply it from there.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%, Tron. And the reality is the success or failure of your digital retail, modern retail initiative, the success or failure is going to hinge on managers, right? Management's active level of participation and engagement, managers' level of awareness to the point that you were making, understanding where the breakdown or the failure points are, and then being able to improve upon them, right? So that, what's a good job? A good job is that today we do better than we did yesterday. That's a good job. And tomorrow we need to do better than we're doing today. And that improvement, right? It's not about perfection, it's just about progress. That improvement is going to be driven by middle management, their level of engagement, their level of awareness, and their level of participation. So I think that that's a great point, Tron.
Yep, absolutely. So as we're talking about this, and that goes perfectly into what the slide we just went to, right? What are some of those challenges we see when executing that digital retailing strategy? That dealer-centric mentality, not wanting to give up the information, not wanting to embrace the whole customer-centric, wanting it to be more of a lead generation tool.
Let's just think about that. We're all consumers, right? We're a random sampling of society. If you called a business or an organization that had a product or service and you asked some pretty basic fundamental questions like, is that product available and how much is it? Mm-hmm. And they couldn't or they wouldn't answer those two very simple questions, would you do business with them? Mm-hmm. And the answer is probably no. Right? And so that's what we have to understand is, where is today's marketplace? Are we operating off of a antiquated mindset and an antiquated business model, which doesn't mirror the demands of the marketplace today? And that's one of the biggest challenges that we see. And that's why I think that a lot of dealers, a lot of organizations have to go through a bit of a paradigm shift.
Mm-hmm. And Danielle, actually, if you want to speak to this, when we're talking about objectives and planning, you had brought up when we did the poll how nice it was not to see people wanting that lead generation, right? Because that's what we typically see when we're out there. And what are some of the challenges that you have when you're trying to explain Prodigy and how Prodigy works to a dealer who's looking for that lead generation tool?
Yeah, so that's something that definitely comes up a lot. And really the job that we have is to kind of educate the people at hand about everything else that they're not thinking of. There's so many facets of it that they're not considering because they're literally looking at it strictly as like a widget that's being slapped on a website, where we have so many other things that we're able to do from a showroom standpoint and from a online standpoint to really create that omni-channel experience, kind of like what you have here. But one other thing I want to add that is definitely a challenge that dealers are facing when they want to execute a digital retailing strategy is they don't have top-down leadership. Meaning maybe it's an internet manager or somebody like that who vets out the program and gets somebody to sign off on it, but there's no top-down like leadership from the VP, from the owner, from the GM. So there's a disconnect, and then that creates friction. So it's really important that no matter what, you always have the support and guidance from the owner, from the GM, and from the entire management staff. It can't just be one person.
No, I think that's a great point. What I say all the time is we have to, organizationally and culturally, we have to understand that everything is interrelated and interdependent upon the other, right? You can't just have a process that is relegated to two people in your internet sales department, right, that isn't also reinforced or executed upon at the sales desk, at the sales floor, utilizing the technology and the input of the information into the technology. You're going to fail. Right? So everything is interrelated and interdependent upon the other. So we have to have not only that continuity of messaging that we had talked about earlier, but we have to have that acceptance and that agreement that this is who we are. This is our SOP. This is our standard operating procedures, and it permeates every department within the department. Right? I'm sorry, every person within the department. Yep. And that's why it's a cultural approach, and it starts again at the dealer and the GM. And then it has to, kind of drive down through your salesperson or your BDC. We haven't even touched on BDC,
Right.
because this really has nothing to do, if you think about it, with business development centers per se, right? It really has to do with your lead management team.
Whoever's handling the leads.
Whoever's handling the leads.
Salespeople, BDC, however you're going to do it.
Right.
So we got a question, and I think actually this will be a great one for you, Trung. So Jared asks, as we talk about importance of process and execution, how can we hold accountability when most DR platforms don't integrate with our CRM, aka not having a BDC or sales on the same page of the customer journey?
Yeah, I think that's really important to note that most digital retailing platforms on the market, they are piggybacking off of some antiquated technology. And unfortunately, it has limits in terms of how they can communicate with the dealership's existing systems in place. But one of the things that we do fairly well here at Prodigy is that deep integration. We understand that if we're trying to enhance the customer journey, we need to make sure that the dealer is on that same exact page. So our integrations here at Prodigy actually directly connects into the existing CRM systems and existing technology systems in place. So whatever the customer is doing online, if they do a trade-in, they do a credit app, they're configuring their payments, whatever part of that they're currently in, all of that seamlessly integrates directly into the dealership CRM system. So everybody's on the same page, right? Salesperson's on the same page, the BDC rep, there's no disconnect, there's no drop off. And as soon as those customers walk into the front door, right, all of those notes that, or the interactions that happen online is listed right there front and center. So everybody is really aligned and there's no disconnect. And actually, Jared over at Germain Automotive and Brian, the general manager of there, they're a perfect example of this, right? They really take the process really seriously. And I think even before we implemented the technology itself, they actually mapped out what is the road to success with digital retailing and what are the different pillars that we need to have in place in order to have the technology work on all cylinders. So they did a really good job. And when you compare execution on that type of level versus some dealers who are looking to just throw a button on their website, you can see just the night and day difference in between both of those.
Yeah, that's great, and that's one of the great features of Prodigy. What we talk about with digital retail or modern retail, again, we refer to it as modern retail, is that an organization has to be prepared to have a level of openness or transparency with the consumer. And to the point that Trung was making, when there's a level of transparency internally, where I know what the journey has been of the consumer, right? I know that they've selected a vehicle. I know that they've unlocked a price. I know that they've had their vehicle appraised, right? And all that information is now in the CRM. We can meet the consumer where they are. We don't have to start at step one, which is, so what sort of vehicle are you interested in purchasing today? We know that they've already selected a vehicle. We know that they've already unlocked price and they were concerned about trade value. So that transparency works both ways, if you will. So we have to be transparent with the consumer, right? Open and transparent with our pricing and the information. But then we have to leverage that information that we have internally to not only better serve the customer, enhance that customer experience, but again, to streamline that sales process for them, which, I think speed up was number 4,
yes,
which was 35 or 38%, something like that. So that's going to be important to us, but also to the consumers as well.
Yep. So we have another quick question for you guys. Those of you who have a DR solution, you've been working with a DR platform. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've faced as you've been going to digital retailing? So we have lack of training and support resources, staffing, budget, right? The ability to pay for it, can't find the right solution, competing organizational priorities, see that a lot, clunky integration with other systems, unable to perfect the online to offline experience, so the handoff from website to the showroom.
Continuity.
Yep, or lack of adoption among salespeople. And again, you can choose multiple ones. Please don't check them all because we don't need everyone to be at 50, every one of them to be at 50%. But tell us, you can choose more than one. What are some of the issues that you're seeing as you've been trying to put this into place? We'll give it just a couple of seconds here for everyone to weigh in. And let's see, what did we get out of this? Oh, we're still voting. Hold on just another few seconds. Okay, and results, drum roll, please. So
Survey
easily,
says.
lack of adoption among salespeople is number one by a large margin, by 61%.
They're at 61%.
61%. We had a 45% say unable to perfect the online to offline experience. I think that kind of ties hand in hand with the first one. And then 41% said clunky integration with other systems. Who came up with the word clunky? I'll have to find that one out. 18% said competing organizational priorities. 16% said can't find the right solution. And then staffing budget, lack of training and support. So lack of training and support was actually at 23%. I don't know why that one didn't prioritize, right? And then staffing and budget was down towards the bottom. So that's what we saw. That's what we're seeing out there. Danielle, what are you guys seeing when you're going in there? Is this following kind of what you guys are running into when you're out there?
So it's really interesting that lack of adoption for salespeople was number one. And it's so funny, but I'm very hands-on. I'm part of the team that actually goes out and implements and trains stores on how to best maximize this. And for me personally, that is the one thing that I take extremely serious. And the biggest thing that causes a lack of adoption is two things. Number one is the management staff letting senior salespeople basically continue on doing what they've been doing because they're either older or they've had a lot of success and they don't force them to fully adopt and change. Or secondly, there's nobody holding the team accountable. And I find that if you can isolate and fix those two issues, you have 100% adoption. And what we find at Prodigy, because of the fact that not only are we integrated online, but also in store, we're very sticky and it becomes ingrained in their actual process. So it's very difficult for a salesperson to not utilize us and not adopt because they would truly be going completely against the grain. And I would say that that is what we see, but a lot of the other responses on there are very common, but a lot of that has to do with how you are trained and implemented. So make sure if you do have a solution, if that solutions team is not in contact with you and trying to check up on you and make sure you guys are good, that is very important. It needs to be an ongoing conversation. It's not a one and done kind of thing.
Yeah, and also just to add on top of that as well is the salespeople need to be able to they need to be able to perceive value from the solution as well, right? So like making sure that they have the proper and adequate training and understanding that the solution itself is going to provide value. It's going to streamline the entire process. And, I would say that a lot of the dealerships that we work with, as soon as we kind of roll out the solution, they're looking left to right and they're saying, man, where has this been over the last couple of years? If I had this 3 years ago when I first started, I'm sure I could have been selling more cars and not staying until 11, 12 o'clock at night. So really making sure that the salespeople see the value in it. And in order for them to see the value in it, there needs to be a level of commitment to be able to learn and train and be able to adopt the product as well.
I think that was, both Danielle and Trung, I think that was great stuff. Danielle, everything is a function of management, right? So if we have lack of adoption, it's because managers have allowed their people to kind of waver. And the continuity of that offline to online experience, again, that's a management tool. But to both of your points, it really comes down to training. The one and done, that Danielle had said. I think most people think that if they train on it once, maybe twice, then my people are good to go. The reality is with most training, people only retain 10 to 15% the first time. And if that training isn't consistently and positively reinforced over a 90 to 120 day period, it dissipates pretty rapidly because we go back to our conditioned process, right? Those motor skills. So there's a cognitive dissonance that occurs, not to get too deep, with new techniques, new technology, where if it's not reinforced consistently, we just kind of naturally, it's the human condition, we revert back to that which we've always done. And that's why management is so critical here. They have to kind of keep bringing everybody back to center, back to the new way of doing business, so that over a 30, 60, 90-day period, it now becomes second nature. And that's when they will implement it and they'll execute it consistently without a whole lot of thought and consideration, because it's almost like they're at the learning stage of driving a car, right? How many of us have driven home at the end of the day after work and drove 12 miles and been through 3 stoplights, and all of a sudden you're in your driveway and you don't even know how you got there, right? So that driving is a conditioned habit that you don't have to think about.
Yep.
And that's what training does here, to the utilization of the technology, but more importantly, the implementation and execution of the processes that'll benefit everybody.
And exactly to that point, a lot of times the problem with any solution that you're going to incorporate and bring into your dealership, if you're only going to do a day or two of training on it and then think it's just going to become the way,
don't bother.
Right. A lot of the questions in the chat are, how do I get my older salespeople to engage with this? How do I get my established salespeople to use it, not just my new person? If you're not going to be reinforcing it and making it a priority, that this is now the culture of our dealership, this is how we do things here, it's not going to work. You can't plug this in one day and then think it's just going to magically change everything.
Yeah, I agree. And back to the old salespeople, the adage, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I disagree,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's 2 different types of conversations. There are those that want to, that don't really know how to, right? They don't know how to leverage the technology. They don't know how to navigate the technology. They don't understand, to Trung's point, the WIFM, right? The what's in it for me. Like, if I do these things, what's the benefit to me as it relates to sales or to income? Right? So I've got all the time in the world for those types of people who just want to be taught. They say that there is no learning without understanding.
Yep.
So a lot of times we just have to slow down so that they understand why we're using the tool. What's the value proposition to them? What's the value proposition to the consumer? What's the outcome or the benefit to both parties, the consumer and the salesperson, right? So there are those that don't know how to, but want to. That's one type of conversation. And then there are those that have been taught, trained, and understand that this is the way we're going, and they're not doing it. They're choosing not to do it. They don't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a whole lot of answers for that type of salesperson or employee, right? So the ones that don't know how to, but they want to, all the time in the world. The ones that know how to, but choose not to, that's a different kind of conversation. And I'm not, saying that we have to run back and fire everybody, but there has to be an understanding and a clarity to the employer-employee role and responsibility, right? My job as an employer is to train and develop you as to a fundamental process and why we're doing it from a business perspective. Yours is to do it, right? And if somebody won't do it, we have to figure it out because they don't know how to or they don't want to. And each of those is a different type of conversation.
Yep. So let's actually get into some of our best practices for online lead conversion. So Trung, why don't you walk us through how we actually work on that lead conversion? What are some of the best practices that you guys have found there with Prodigy?
Actually, Danielle can actually jump into this. She actually specializes in working with dealerships on these specific best practices. Danielle, why don't you take a shot at this?
Thanks so much. Yeah. So basically when it comes down to the lead best practices, what we did, we kind of looked at all of the dealerships that we work with and kind of stack rate them by top performers, average performers, and bottom performers. And what we found is the dealerships that were maximizing these 3 key points were the ones that were seeing the best success. And these points being, first, driving market awareness. So we're going to dive into all of these a little bit deeper. Secondly, having really good call to action buttons. And then third, how to do the right lead follow-up. So let's go ahead and dive into creating awareness is the first one.
All righty.
All right. So basically what this comes down to as a strategy, think about this with your current solution, or if you're considering a digital retailing solution, you really need to come up with an overall marketing branding strategy, meaning, are you going to make this unique specifically for your dealership, something that is branded, something that you can incorporate into all areas of your marketing, meaning social media, TV, radio, Google, wherever you're currently advertising, you need to start thinking about how do we incorporate that messaging and make sure that there's a call to action on that messaging that ties it back to the digital retailing solution, which is going to capture those customers and you're going to get them. The worst thing that we see is when a dealership has a digital retailing solution on their site, but in all of their marketing and messaging, there's nothing that talks about it. So there's an absolute disconnect when really it should be very cohesive, and that customer should know exactly what that process is throughout the entire thing. So that's one that we definitely see as a huge, huge best practice. Next, and then anything that you two guys want to add with that, Lawson?
Yeah,
Or,
so and just real quick on that as well. So I think it goes both ways. So a lot of times we see dealerships that aren't advertising or aren't marketing their online solution, but we also, or their digital retailing solution, but then we also see some that promise you the world. They promise you you can do all this and we'll deliver it to you and you can buy it online. And then what happens when I call you up? So when are you coming in? Your presence is leverage. We need to get you that best deal. And so I think you see it in dealerships that are broken both ways.
Yeah, you know, the old saying, you can't be kind of pregnant, right? And I think to I think to Danielle's point is if you're gonna go there, then go there, right? And it has to be intuitive, right? Like I have to understand just naturally through the subtlety of your site, the nudging of what the next step is. And we've all been to Amazon. We've all bought things on Amazon. And this is truly the Amazon effect. The consumer wants to shop, wants to research, wants to get information, wants to naturally move lower into the sales funnel. Our sites and our communication, right, is got to be conducive to helping them move through that process just naturally. It shouldn't be that difficult, really, if you think about it.
Absolutely. So let's talk about those calls to action, Danielle. What do you have on that?
yeah, so this is a really big one that a lot of people don't focus on, but it's huge. And as we audit hundreds of dealers' websites all the time, what we find is a lot of dealerships do a couple things that they definitely need to not do. Number one is they have way too many CTAs. Like I've audited websites and seen dealerships that have 9, 10, 11 call to actions on their site. That just creates a really cluttered, confused experience for the customer. So what we recommend is to have no more than 5. And if you are going to have 5, make sure that those buttons are actually going to take that customer, whatever step that they want to be on, into the digital retailing solution. So with Prodigy, something that's really awesome is all of our CTAs lead into our environment. So whether that customer wants to value their trade, get their best price, get pre-approved, schedule a test drive, wherever they are in their own process, they can click into any of our CTAs and it will take them to that step within our solution. That's extremely important. Most providers you see on the market only allow you to have 1 CTA. So really the other ones that the dealership has are lead forms, other third parties, and that kind of creates a really cluttered experience for the customer. And imagine how that looks on mobile, guys, because 62% of all traffic is going to mobile for automotive. So it's like the less is more, and the more streamlined you can be, the better. And we find that dealers that do this see a lot of success, the ones that utilize these tips right here. Very, very important.
I think that's a great point, you know, Danielle, the cluttered page, you know, the too many CTAs, too many calls to action. What it does is it creates this sensory overload, right? Where the consumer doesn't know what to do, doesn't know where to go next. So what do? They do nothing, or they abandon the page, abandon the site completely. So there's a lot of adverse and negative effects when there's too many calls to action. You know, my analogy is kind of like street signs, right? A CTA is kind of like a street sign. Like, where do you want to go next? Where do you want to get off, right? What's important to you? And so again, if there's too many, there's sensory overload. I'm confused. I don't know what to do, so I don't do anything. And it's no different than on the sales floor, right? If you show a consumer 3 or 4 different vehicles while they're in the showroom or on the lot, they're inevitably going to say, well, I need to think about it, right? And then they're going to leave because it's too much information. So if it is too cluttered, if there is too much information, we shut down as people, and then we abandon the page or the site. So that's obviously not the point. It's not the point of the exercise, right?
Absolutely.
Definitely.
So then let's talk about closing the deal, Danielle. What do we have on that?
Yep. So just kind of to wrap it up here, this is kind of the last really big one is now that we have, you know, the marketing set, the CTAs are set. Now that we have these leads coming in, it's so critical. And you guys will definitely touch on this too, that the teams that are responding to these leads are acknowledging the steps that that customer has already completed and making sure that they're acknowledging those steps and then giving that customer the next step in the process. So truly, instead of being like a BDC or a lead responder, they're being like a virtual concierge in the sense that they are basically catering to that customer where they are and allowing them to move through the process and assist them through that process if they want to be assisted, or you know, allowing them to kind of do it themselves and let them know that the car can be delivered to them. So it's a little bit of a shift of mentality when it comes to dealing with these leads because they are so enhanced. They have so much information on them. And it's so critical that we are acknowledging those steps that that customer has done, because if a customer is online and they begin to start the process, but then when the person calls them to follow up and they don't acknowledge anything, that creates the disconnect. That's what frustrates the customers. And this is the key thing that will truly change how your whole process is. And I know you guys can definitely speak to this part.
100%. And again, I think there's been an antiquated mindset. The customers can't, or they won't, they don't want to. It's really us, right? We have limiting thoughts, limiting beliefs. So therefore we have limiting actions. So never mind, do we have limiting actions? We limit the actions of our customers, our consumer, right? You can't argue anymore that the customers won't buy a car online. You can't. Those days are gone, right? If you look at Tesla, Tesla's up over 400,000 cars a year now, right? All online. You look at Carvana, you look at Vroom, right? CarMax. The consumers are transaction ready in today's environment. They're researching the vehicle for 16 to 18 hours. They know more about the car than we do. Let's be honest. And so they want to buy. They've been conditioned to shop that way and to buy that way. My son works for Electrolux. Electrolux is the second largest appliance maker in the world. Stoves, ovens, microwaves, things of that. In addition to vacuums, they sell tens of millions of appliances online, right? Online.
Sure.
And now I get it. An oven is different than a car. Is it? Is it really different? Right? It's still a major purchase for most people. Furniture, right? Mattresses. You can buy a mattress online now and have it shipped to the house, and it's in a box, and then you open it up and it folds out in your bedroom, right? So the customers have been conditioned that way. The struggle or the challenge, right, is in us.
And Carvana's doing it with used cars.
Right.
How does a new car manufacturer challenge that when they're able to do it with used cars? Because if you would think if anyone couldn't do it, it would be with the used car market, because there I definitely want to see it. And most customers still do want to see it, touch it before they sign, but they want to do more and more of their research online.
And we all knew, right? If you've been in the car business for any length of time at all, you knew, right? And you've known that this is where the market is going. Whether you consider it to be a blessing or a curse, COVID has pulled, right, the future into the present. COVID has expedited this, the rate of adoption, if you will, from the consumer's perspective. But as always, we as an industry, we as a dealership or an organization, there's a lag time that we have. Those who get it, who understand it and get to the front of the parade, they're going to outsell everyone else. They're going to dominate the market. And if they have the right long-term follow-up or retention process in place, they're going to be eating the dealer down the road. They're going to be eating their lunch, right? Because this is where the consumer's at. This is where the market is at. The question becomes are you there?
Right. Which goes perfectly into how do we create that deeper customer engagement. So Trung, why don't you walk us through a little bit about how Prodigy helps their dealers really get into that deep customer engagement?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, a lot of the feedback that I get from dealers that are using digital retailing is they have customers that hop into the tool, they configure their payments, and they hop off and they're gone. Then, a lead gets sent to the dealership, and then you rely on that lead follow-up to re-engage with the customer. Here at Prodigy, we really want to give the dealerships the ability to start engaging with the customers when they're most engaged, right? When they're actually going through the tool itself. So pretty exciting. I mean, out of the whole pandemic and the COVID situation here at Prodigy, our team really wanted to come out with an innovative solution to allow consumers and dealerships to engage in that same level as they would on the showroom floor. So we released our virtual showroom solution, which allows the managers at the dealership or the BDC reps or whoever you assign to really be able to manage these type of deals that are coming in from online to start having a live virtual conversation with these customers. Now, I know that a lot of dealerships are using managed chat services today. We're not trying to deliver a chat service. We're really trying to engage with them on a whole nother level. So outside of just being able to video conference them, they can actually utilize our iPad digital solution, which acts almost as a Apple-like concierge service, to actually take this iPad out on the lot, out on the showroom floor, and actually do live walkarounds of the vehicle, right? So they can actually get a little bit deep into the interior, have them look at the interior of the car. Maybe it's a truck that you're selling and you want to look at the bed of the truck. So really being able to get on a whole nother level of engagement, as well as being able to interactively work a deal in real time. So I think, a lot of the feedback that I hear is, well, maybe the expectations on what they're seeing isn't as aligned to what they're actually qualified for, right? So here, we're going to be able to have more contextual conversations, right? Kind of like conversational commerce. So being able to see what stage of the deal that they're in, we're able to see the payments that they're looking at. If they did a trade-in, if they did a credit application at that time, the manager can actually view all those things and actually send back an updated deal offer in real time, right? So being able to converse with them throughout that digital retailing experience or that session is really going to help drive that engagement. And what we're seeing is when customers jump into those engagements and those conversations virtually, we're seeing those conversion rates definitely increase. And then lastly here, one of the things that we want to make sure that is if these customers
Oh, Trong, you kind of froze up there. We were doing so well too. We were
personalized follow-up based on those actions.
Perfect. We lost you for a bit there, Trung.
Oh, sorry about that. I think internet there. I'll go ahead and kick that back to you, Lawson. I think my internet here is a little choppy.
No, it's great. And so what we love about the whole idea of digital retailing and it's about lead enhancement and having better conversations. So going into what we help stores do once you have these technologies is no longer is it okay to just simply have one follow-up process, an internet follow-up process. You need to be following up with wherever the customer is. If the customer is talking about their trade, all of your follow-up needs to be talking about trade. Right. And understanding those different stages that a customer's in. Are they in the awareness stage or the consideration stage or actually the purchase? So myself, I'm currently looking for possibly getting a truck. I still don't know what kind of truck I want. Do I want a Tacoma? Do I want a Tundra? Do I want an F-150? Do I want, a Ranger? I'm still deciding. There is nothing a dealer could say to me right now to get me to come in. I'm not there yet. But wherever I'm going to buy it is going to be the one who's giving me the information when I'm wanting it. So right now, when I'm engaging and simply asking the differences between the vehicles and letting me do side-by-side comparisons, that kind of thing, that's where I'm going to go so that whenever I decide I'm ready, you're ready to take me there.
The big thing I heard between what you just said, Matt, and certainly what Trung was talking about in the earlier slides was personalized communication, right? More of that concierge, right? That customized interaction with me that is relevant and pertinent to me based off of what's important to me. And if you think about it historically as dealerships, our sales process, our sales environment has always been more dealer-centric, not customer-centric. So our communication, our initial reactive process to inbound internet leads, inbound sales calls, right? It has to be customer-centric. Our follow-up has got to be customer-centric. And to Matt's point, specific to where I am within my road to the sale, right? Because my road to the sale might be all over the place, but your conversations and your follow-up have to be relevant and pertinent to me with wherever I am within that process. It's about my process, not the dealer's process. And so that's why flexibility is so critical. And our people have to be trained to be, again, customer-centric. What's most important to the consumer? And if I have a personalized, customized conversation to them, they're going to value that greater than they would from that interaction with the guy down the street. And then they're going to want to engage and they're going to want to visit. And that's really what we're talking about. And with follow-up, and with follow-up, it's not about pursuing them, it's about engaging them with where they're at and what's going to be relevant or pertinent to them next week or next month. Because not everybody's going to buy a car. We already know that.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean we can't follow up with everyone. So it's about the personalization and the customization of how we communicate and motivate the consumer.
And we still do need to motivate the customer because I've never met the customer once who was happy with the number he saw for his trade.
Right.
So there's still, when being more transparent and being open with them is great, but you still have to have those word tracks of how to move and motivate a customer.
No one's ever said, oh, I thought it was going to be less.
Really? Yeah. Really? You're giving me that much?
Or I thought the price was going to be higher, right? So they've never said that. So to Matt's point, there's still going to be pushbacks, right? They're going to push back on price. They're going to push back on trade value. They're going to push back on downstroke or rate or payment or term, right? That's just a natural horse trading that still exists out there in the marketplace. I wish everyone said yes to the first pencil, but they're not going to. But that's why our people skills and our training and the verbiage and our talking points are going to be so critical moving forward.
And as we go through this, it's important to understand the KPIs we need to be looking at today. The days of just how many calls do we have, how many points do we have, that's not what we're looking at anymore, right? It's about quality engagements and moving them further down the funnel. What stage are they on? Are we pushing this information out? And Trung, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about the reporting that's in Prodigy? What are some of the KPIs that you're tracking and that you're seeing dealers really paying attention to?
Yeah, exactly. I think we talked about making sure that the accountability is there. In order to have that accountability, you need to be able to have the proper reporting. And within our platform, you're really going to be able to see the entire customer's journey from when they begin their deal online and being able to see what steps in the actual journey that they've completed. So being able to see, for example, like how many customers actually jumped into the tool. Out of those customers that jumped into the tool, how far did those customers go down the funnel? How many of them actually led to a credit application, which led to a test drive, which actually led to an appointment to the store, which eventually the ultimate goal is that leads to a sell itself. But our reporting doesn't necessarily just stop there. We actually report all the way through and track that customer's journey, even when they're in the store, right? So did they go on a test drive in store, right? Did they complete forms? Did you capture specific license and insurance? And what are the other steps of the process in stores are you actually reporting and tracking? And Prodigy makes sure that we're recording all that, and we provide that data back to the dealership so they can understand where customers are falling off on. And based on that information, they're going to be able to pivot some of the strategies from there.
Yeah, this is all great information and great management feedback. And I think it's a shift or a change with what most managers or even salespeople are accustomed to trying to manage or work towards. But this information, when gathered or collected properly, is so actionable, right? It is so impactful for the consumer and the outcome of those customer interactions that it's critical that everyone really be aware of those. So this is great information. And you have to ask yourself, certainly if you're a manager, like, do your people know this? Like, do you know where the customer journey is and where they're jumping off and how many times they've visited that page and how many times they've opened the email and how many times they've reviewed the content? I mean, all of this stuff is great actionable information that you really have to have that, again, paradigm shift, managing a little bit differently than maybe you have historically.
Absolutely, 100%. So we did go a little long. We do appreciate everyone staying with us and going through this. I blame Trung. I think Trung, you was.
I'm going to go with Danielle. Yeah, way